Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Fed Up, your no BS nutrition podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Marie, certified personal trainer and nutrition specialist, working with clients since 2014. After swimming up diet culture's bullshit stream for so many years, I am fed the absolute up with how miserable it's making people feel when we are supposed to be getting healthier. This podcast is here to help you gain your sanity back so you can stop yo-yoing once and for all and finally learn how to trust yourself so you can enjoy food again without fear or shame while still getting to your health goals. My aim is to teach you how to detect the BS in not just the food and diet industries, but in all realms of life, because I know that, like me, we are all just a little fed up. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the very first official full-length episode of Fed Up, your no BS nutrition podcast. And we are going to take it back to science class today. And I really believe that understanding your basic chemistry and biology, obviously, but when you understand some of the basics in chemistry, you can begin to detect a lot of the BS out there in the health and diet industries by asking yourself a couple of questions and seeing it through this filter of what we'll talk about today. So you'll see three different overarching themes that I'll touch on over and over and over again, not just in this episode, but throughout future episodes when I do dismantle a lot of BS, because you can boil it down to what we know about chemistry or what we know so far about chemistry in our bodies and in our food, because as you'll see, one of the very first overarching themes and one of the main themes is everything is chemicals. So we'll talk a lot about that. The second thing is that dosage, meaning how much of that chemical, and context is what makes the poison. And the third thing is we'll touch a lot on this appeal to nature fallacy. You'll see this come up over and over again, just within the dieting industries, but also in the health marketing realms of things as well. So we'll talk about these different logical fallacies, and one of them being this appeal to nature fallacy. So let's get started, shall we? First things first, let's talk about chemicals. What are chemicals? Why should we be afraid of them or not be afraid of them? And let's just start there. So I'm going to try to make this as interesting as it can be, because I know we're talking about chemistry, and as a dietetic student, I actually have to take a lot of chemistry because everything that happens in our body happens because of chemistry. The reason we need food in the first place, and then we get energy to survive, and then we poop some of the food out after, is all happening due to chemical processes in the body. So when we talk about metabolism, that is actually a word to describe the sum of all of the chemical processes in your body. So when you're talking about calories even, or your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, right? What is that actually referring to? What you can break it down to is, say your basic basal metabolic rate is 2,000 calories, okay? So you are burning 2,000 calories just by existing in your body. What that means is that is the amount of energy that is happening, or that your body needs to sustain all of your body's processes, meaning your digestion, your heart is beating, your skin is doing skin things, you're sweating, you're thinking, you're breathing, right? You're doing all of these things, not thinking about it and thinking about it. So plus all of the actual activity that you're doing, right? That is going to be on top of your BMR. So when we are referring to how many calories a food has, what is that talking about is what it's actually, a calorie is the amount of energy it takes. I'm not reading this, I have to remember it. The amount of energy it takes to raise one molecule of water, H2O, by 1 degree, I think probably Celsius. So when we measure food calories, what we're actually measuring is the amount of energy that we can extract from that that food. How do we do that? By chemical digestion and mechanical or physical digestion as well, like chewing, obviously. But when you talk about chemical digestion, it's because what we're doing is we're taking our food and we're chewing it up. Our saliva is helping break down the starches in our mouth, the sugars in our mouth. And then as we swallow the food, now it's in our stomach. All the stomach acid is able to, break down the proteins and break down certain amounts of different other things. And you're able to then pass it to your intestines. And then you're able to extract the food to get into your bloodstream, right? So the way that we do that is by breaking chemical bonds in the food. And then that energy is transferred. So one of the first laws of thermodynamics, or one of the laws of thermodynamics, might be the third law. I don't know. The law of conservation of energy means energy cannot be created or destroyed. It might be the first law. Again, I'm not reading this off. I'm just spewing this out from memory here. But essentially, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you don't eat food that has 200 calories and then the calories go nowhere. They're actually being sent somewhere, whether it's being used to immediately burn up for energy in the form of heat and activity and muscle movement and things like that, or it's getting stored as fat energy or something along those lines. So in the same way that we don't get to just burn a bunch of fires and the smoke doesn't go anywhere, right? Or all of the ashes don't necessarily just disappear. It's, they're just transformed into smoke and other elements. Or other compounds, whatever. So anyway, moving on. When you understand that everything is chemicals, and when you understand that there is elements and atoms and cells and this smaller version of life that you cannot see, everything starts to make a little more sense. So when we look at something like, let's talk about water. Water is an easy one to imagine. Water, we see it as a liquid water, right? But water is made up of tiny, tiny little atoms and cells, and the atoms are oxygen and hydrogen, right? So in a way, water is a chemical, which is why we don't need to be afraid of chemicals. And so when you look at water by itself, it is considered a molecule of 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, aka dihydrogen monoxide. So the way that we name chemicals has to do with their structural compounds, or how they look, or what they're designed like, or what they're shaped as. So something that we learn in organic chemistry is how the international agency that determines the name of chemical compounds is IUPAC. They have to come up with a systematic naming process in the same way that we all know a dog is a dog, which is a mammal, which is an animal, right? There's naming systems. So they had to do the same thing with chemistry. So what they figured out is chemicals get real, real complicated. So the best way that some things are just named like they're named because of who discovered them or something like that. But every chemical compound does have a structural name, and that structural name tells you what the chemical is. So you can talk chemist to chemist across nations, across languages, and be able to know the same chemical compound that you guys are referring to. And again, things get real complicated. So you can't come up with just a brand new name for a chemical compound that has 100 different carbon chains to it. So when you look at something like methyl, if something has the name methyl in it, so it has, it's maybe a long name, like it's bromodimethylhexane or something, right? It's in the middle, or maybe it's in the beginning or something like that. A methyl group is a functional group that's a carbon attached to 3 hydrogens. Carbon makes 4 bonds, which means a methyl group is usually attached to something else. So you have carbon attached to a 1 hydrogen, 2 hydrogen, 3 hydrogen, and 4 something else. That's a methyl group. So you're going to put it in the name when there's a carbon with 3 hydrogens. Same thing if you have something that's named with bromo, that probably has bromine in it. If something ends with zine, like benzene, if you're looking at that ENE suffix, that is usually, or not usually, that is an alkene, which means it has a carbon-carbon double bond. So if you look at benzene, its real chemical name, by the way, is cyclohex 134-triene or something like that, because it's a cyclo it is a ring shape. And then the 1, 3, 4, or like the numbers tell you where the different functional groups are attached to. And benzene is a hydrocarbon, which means it just contains carbon and hydrogen. Like all of this chemical blah, blah, blah that you've probably tuned out by now, all of that to say that you don't have to be worried if you can't pronounce some ingredient or some chemical because they're freaking insane. But also think about that. If you can't pronounce it, but some chemist somewhere can, that doesn't change the health or the safety of that product, right? And it implies that all safe chemicals should have simple names. And like who decided that? Karen, who shops at Whole Foods? Like, no, sorry that you never took chemistry. And chemists have to figure out a way to talk about the thousands and thousands and thousands of different chemical compounds there are that make up life. Because again, point number 1, everything is chemicals. So let's go into point number 2, dosage and context. So let's talk about water. Obviously, we know water is what sustains life. This is what we look for on other planets is water, water, water. Plants need water, animals need water, we all need water. But there is a difference between drinking water and drowning. So again, context. And there is also a way that you can drown yourself from the inside out because you overhydrate. So we all know that you also need electrolytes, sodium, potassium, calcium, all of those electrolytes, and magnesium. Did I say calcium? Magnesium? Whatever. So we all know we need electrolytes. Water has no way of moving in and out of your cells, in and out of your body, except through what we call concentration gradients, which is basically the water moving towards where the soup is more salty. So if your soup, your body, your bloodstream is more salty, you need more water, right? But if you're too watered, your soup's not going to have any flavor and you're going to pass out. So this is something that is huge with like people who are trying to drink a gallon of water a day. If you are a smaller human, or maybe your electrolytes aren't as balanced because you've also decided to cut out all of your like savory junk food and everything else, so you're not getting the electrolytes and then you're overhydrating, you are in risk of dying in the same way of being dehydrated. So a lot of people 75 hard, or they just heard you should be drinking a gallon of water a day, whatever. Here's how to actually tell your hydrogen. Can we tell if we're talking about chemistry? Here's how you can actually tell you're hydrated. Your urine color and other symptoms, but your urine. Your kidneys need a certain amount of time to filter your blood. That's what you're doing, by the way, with your kidneys, and why you pee is because we are collecting all of the byproduct of metabolism and our body living from our bloodstream and from our organs. We're collecting the CO2 and the creatinine and all the byproducts of protein catabolism and all of these things. So we're collecting the byproduct. We have to put that byproduct with some water so that it can flush. This is very basic layman terminology, so you can imagine this. But your kidneys need a certain amount of time to do this. So if you are flushing the toilet before there's enough stuff in it, it's not going to, no, let's not do that. You need about 2 to 3 hours to filter your blood. You should also know that your urine should probably still be a little bit yellow. So if it's completely clear, that means that you have not given your kidneys enough time to get that byproduct, because that yellow is part of the byproduct. You also don't want it obviously like dark yellow and pungent. That means you don't have enough water in your body, right? So in that same way, that too much water is bad, not enough water is bad. If you drink water versus you breathe water, it has a dosage. So when you hear some guru talking about avoid this chemical, avoid this food, you need to ask yourself, well, how much of that food do I need to eat to be concerned? Because most of the time it's, in order for that chemical to actually be dangerous in that food while I'm eating it, I would have to eat a semi-truckload of grapes. You know what I mean? Which like you would literally die of grape poisoning before you got that amount of chemical that they're so-called saying that you should be worried about. Does that make sense? So your first chemical question when you are detecting bullshit should be, isn't everything chemicals? So if everything is chemicals, but you're talking about a certain amount of chemical, okay, that means that there must be a dosage or a usage of that chemical that I should be worried about, which is true, right? You can probably use bleach in a diluted sense to clean your bathroom. Again, it says on the bottle, do not use full strength, and also do not drink. Like there's a difference. If you get a little bit on your skin, if you breathe a little bit in once a month as you disinfect things, you're probably going to be okay. If you're a house cleaner and you're in bleach 10 hours a day, breathing it in without ventilation, maybe consider you're breathing in fumes. So let's give the example of pesticides. Pesticides we'll have a whole lovely episode on, but let's briefly talk about the difference in the people who are out in the field spraying pesticides, breathing it in all day, every day, multiple months, multiple years of their life, versus by the time it's washed and processed and gets to us and we're eating it in the amount that we're eating it. The study that came out once that was like, pesticides lead to a certain amount of cancers, blah, blah, blah. It was done on these workers out in the field, which 100% we should be worried about their lungs and potential to breathing in this hazardous product or, in the amount that they're doing it in. We don't have to be worried about eating the grapes after the fact. So that's how you can, again, look at context. There's a difference between cleaning with bleach versus drinking bleach. So when you filter, okay, everything is chemicals, number one. Number two, dosage and context. And number three, this appeal to nature fallacy has just got to die hard and quick because it's been kind of around for a long, long time. And you can kind of put it in a lot of different contexts, not just in the nutrition realm, but in terms of people thinking like, okay, there's this romanticized version of not being in the city because concrete jungle, right? But let's go out in the wilderness and back into the nature because we need to be barefoot touching grass, right? And I'm not saying that any of that is wrong. I definitely believe in being out in the trees and in the grass and in the fresh air. Super helpful for mental health, physical health, all of the things. But this appeal to nature fallacy is one of those logical fallacies that says, if it's natural, it's better. If it's natural, it's safer or it's healthier. And if it's man-made or if it's synthetic or if it's whatever, it's not natural. And let me just remind y'all, snake venom is natural. Hurricanes are natural. The volcano that killed all the dinosaurs and the meteor that killed all the dinosaurs, whatever one you want to say, it was natural. Dinosaurs were natural, and if they were here today, they'd probably still eat us. So natural things try to kill you all the time. Just because it's natural does not mean it's better. Something else that, again, will kind of bring it to maybe farming practices is people will think, oh, well, natural farming is better. But a lot of natural farming came from lab practices where we studied and we fucked with shit and we were like, okay, what happens if we do this? What happens if we do that? And now we are able to do those things in a controlled environment with predictable outcomes. That is safer to me. So let's look at the example of insulin. Insulin, by the way, is a GMO today, a genetically modified organism, because we used to synthesize insulin from a dog's or a pig's pancreas, because that's what early doctors did was let's dissect this dog, take out its freaking pancreas and put it in an 8-year-old diabetic boy and see what freaking happens. And guess what? That's what happened was we figured out how to synthesize insulin, and now we're able to do it in a lab using chemical compounds and chemical interactions, and we don't have to get it from an animal. And we have diabetics that can live past the age of 5 if you're born type 1 or 10, or you can live past freaking 30 if you're type 2. So there's a lot of things that people don't understand about maybe GMOs or about the way that men or humanity have advanced these technologies. And there's this distrust, which I get. You see it a lot in big pharma too, right? Like there's this huge distrust in big pharma. I don't blame anybody about that because they definitely caused a lot of strife in the 2000s with, the opioid epidemic and things like that. I had a lot of like oxys and hydrocodons and other things prescribed to me because I had back pain and dental work and kidney stones and all of these things. And thank God I like took one or two and then I was good, but I had bottles of this shit. And I'm like, if I was any other person, or if I lived with somebody, which I did, but like he wasn't a pill popper, but if I lived with somebody who had like an addiction problem, like that would have been a huge issue. And that is 100% a medical system issue. I was a friggin' teenager. However, at the same token, pharmaceutical medications have saved a lot of people's lives, and cancer interventions and diabetic interventions and, kidney transplants and other organ transplants and heart surgeries. And all of those things are big pharma too, by the way, and antibiotics and flu shots and all of those things that have advanced life and quality of life and our lifespan and all that stuff happens because of our understanding of chemistry. Okay. You don't go into pharmaceuticals. You don't go into surgery. You don't go into freaking anything science related without understanding chemistry, because, say it with me now, number one, everything is chemicals. So looking at our three overarching chemistry themes here: one, everything is made up of chemicals. Two, dosage, context, that's what makes the poison. Number three, natural things try to kill you all the time. So appeal to nature fallacy is this. Yeah, I mean, this is the whole marketing. I mean, and you have it with people will come into a family get together, right, with homemade granola bar that tastes questionable. And, they want everybody to know that it's made with nothing but natural ingredients. Okay, Susan, everything on earth is technically natural because, like, no energy can be created nor destroyed. So everything we have is made of things that we already had. Yeah, let me blow your mind on that one. And that's what I'll leave you with. The more that you think about, I'm going to call it quantum world, because when you really dive into chemistry, how atoms and molecules are bonded together, how we break those bonds and extract energy and transfer energy, whether in our own bodies or in a lab, it's fascinating. It's incredibly complex and challenging to learn in school. Not going to lie, this is my second semester attempt at organic chemistry because it is incredibly challenging. It's a mind fuck. I'm just going to say it, because we don't see water as anything but liquid water. We don't see it as hydrogen, oxygen reacting to everything else around it. Water reacts to everything else. It's just living its own life, and it has its own freaking properties, by the way, that don't exist in any other molecule. It's fascinating. Our DNA is made up of 4 different molecules, 4 different compounds, 4 different chemicals that are found in all of life. Like, that's freaking fascinating chemistry. The way that the Krebs cycle digests and utilizes our carbohydrates for energy to synthesize ATP, which is what makes our cells go, go, go. When they say mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, they're talking about ATP, which, by the way, is from carbohydrates or ketones if you're like really in ketosis, but don't, because your body thinks you're dying. I digress. I will stop this rant now. I love you all. I hope this helps. I hope that this helps set a good, clear foundation for a lot of what we're going to be talking about later. So obviously I hinted at some things that I will be touching on. We'll have full episodes on things like the ketogenic diet, things like pesticides or GMOs and organics. So we'll dive more into those in detail, but I just wanted to lay this overarching blanket of, let's get rid of this chemophobia. We don't have to be afraid of chemicals. We can embrace the chemicals because we are the chemicals. And we can begin to discern the bullshit by asking ourselves, are they specific enough that they can name the chemical and describe the context and the dosage in which it would be used that would be dangerous for me? And are they using things like this appeal to nature fallacy in order to market to me? Are they saying vague statements about, well, those harsh chemicals, blah, blah, blah. What harsh chemicals? Everything's a harsh chemical in high enough dosage, right? So once we start learning how to see this, all of a sudden, by the way, I've just ruined all of the marketing tactics for you, because asking yourself these questions, you're like, oh, I see it everywhere now. I'm so sorry. It's like when you want to buy a car and the next thing you know, everyone's driving that car because you notice it. This is what I hope that you'll start to notice. But if you have any questions, please feel free to DM me on Instagram. I am at Kayla Marie _fit. If you are interested in nutrition counseling, I do a 1-to-1 program with you. We start with 30 days and then we go from there to see how well we like to work together. And my first 30-day program starts with a lot of these basic, I won't even call them basic, with these nutrition essentials that really lay a good foundation for working together in the future, because I'm not going to be pulling some trendy bullshit diet at your way or giving you some BS answer like, well, you got to avoid that because we're avoiding chemicals, because then you can say, then avoid life. Anyway, I hope y'all have the greatest day ever. And thank you so much for listening. We will talk again soon next week. And I just hope that you guys really like these podcast episodes. I know that sometimes it's a little overdone. Everyone's starting a podcast. But I talk a lot on my stories on Instagram and I've gotten a lot of feedback. I've had a lot of clients tell me I should start podcasts. So this is not me trying to be trendy. This is me trying to get all my angst out about diet culture and all of the other things, and then also be able to send certain episodes to like clients or other friends, because it's like, oh, you know what? I already talked about 40 minutes on pesticides. Here you go. So that's kind of my goal with this, and I hope y'all enjoy it. So leave me your feedback, leave me a review. I would love to hear what y'all think, and I'll see you next week. Bye.